Hey, what's up, musers? This is John at Muse for You, here to help you build awesome websites without code. And in this video tutorial, I'm going to go over the new updates to the hover boxes found at museforyoushop.com. So with the new update, they now work with the responsive width and height option in Adobe Muse, meaning that you can set the hover boxes to change size and width and height as the browser resizes, and the spacing between the hover boxes will be relative to each other. So I'll go ahead and show a quick example. So here I'm on the vertical panel hover box, which is the newest hover box I just released a few days ago, and it's set to responsive width and height. So when I resize the browser, we can see that the hover boxes are changing size and the spacing between them stays the same. So before, it was kind of set to responsive width, where the hover boxes would resize in width and height, but the spacing wouldn't be the same as the hover boxes resized. So this has been updated for all the hoverbox widgets, so they now work really well with the responsive width and height options in Adobe Muse. So there we go, and then I set a 480 breakpoint and just align the hover boxes down the middle. So I'll go ahead and showcase the vertical panel hover box really quick. Just has a nice panel that kind of slides up, and you can set the text for the hover boxes. And then they're set to responsive width and height. There we go. And then at the 480, I line them up vertically. So I'll go ahead and show a quick demonstration of the new updates to the hover boxes. So let's begin.
Muse for You, awesome websites without code.
So here I'll go into Muse. I have a blank site. So I'll go to the library panel here to the right. And here I'll type in vertical panel hover box. So this is the newest one. I'll go over a few other ones as well. And here I'll click, hold, and drag and place into Adobe Muse. And here I'll select an image. So I'll click on Add File. So I'll click Add File and I'll select an image here. And I'll make the width of the hover box. We'll set it to 300 pixels by 300 pixels. So with all the hover boxes, the images need to be cropped first before placing into the hover box to get the exact aspect ratio. So if you want a perfect square, you'll have to crop the image to be a perfect square and then place in the hover box. And a website I use a lot for this is berm.net, where you can set the width and height of the image, and you can align it and set the quality. When I resize it, let's say I want to resize it to 600 by 600, I usually make the quality 100% because the image will be fairly small anyways if it's being resized to 600 by 600. And then you can drag and drop the files here and then save the .zip file with the cropped images. You can also use any cropping tool, Photoshop, or even the built-in preview on a Mac. Okay, so I'll go back into Muse. And here we have the hover box. So I'll just place it in the center for now. And if I go to the resize option right here at the top, we can set it to none, responsive width and height, and stretch it to browser width. So right now it's set to none. So if I preview in the browser, I go to File, Preview Page in Browser, and I resize the browser, we can see the hover box doesn't resize. It just stays that same size. So if I were to say responsive width, the hover box will resize. So here we go. We can see it resizes there, and it doesn't go lower than 230 pixels in width, because here in the widget options we have the minimum width set to 230. So I'll just change it to 0 so we can see it get really small. Sometimes you don't want it to get really small because the text won't fit within the hover box. In this case it does. We can see it says Muse for You, and it fits within the hover box when it's really small. But as we can see, it gets really small there. And just as an example of what responsive width does, I'm going to place two hover boxes right below each other. And then I'll preview. And if I make it smaller, we can see we have this big gap in between these two hover boxes. Now this can be fixed by setting it to responsive width and height. So if I select both of these hover boxes, I go to the resize option right up here, and I say responsive width and height, and I preview, and I resize, we can see that those hover boxes stay the same spacing relative to each other. We don't have that big gap, which works really well with built-in elements in Adobe Muse. So if I were to make a rectangle and I were to place it right below these hover boxes, and I make this rectangle responsive width and height as well, and I preview and I resize the browser, we can see all those elements stay relative to each other. And this is the way the hover boxes were intended to be. I just recently got around to the coding aspect of it to be able to make it work really well with Adobe Muse. So it kind of works just like elements in Adobe Muse. So if you're really keen on responsive width and height elements, the hover boxes are now a perfect element that you can add to your website, and they'll work really well with all the other elements on your website, and you won't have any big gaps or spaces between the hover boxes or different elements on your website. And they work really well with the new version of the responsive lightbox gallery, or the RLG single widgets. So you can have a nice gallery that's responsive width and height, and for the hover boxes, and then link the hover boxes to the responsive lightbox gallery widget. So I'll just go ahead and do a few more demonstrations. All the hover boxes at museforyoushop.com have this update now. So if I were to say, let's say the 180 degrees hoverbox widget. So here we have the 180 text reveal hoverbox widget 1.1. So here I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. I'll add a file, and we'll add this one here. Let's make it a bit larger. I'll make it 400 by 400. And here we go. You might hear the rain outside. It's starting to rain. But here, yeah, so I'll copy this. Or actually, let's make a nice grid. So let's do 300 by 300 for here. And we'll just make a nice 9 by 9 grid. And one thing I want to mention with hover boxes, if you have multiple hover boxes and you want them all to be linked to an element, or the lightbox gallery, or to different pages, make sure all the hover boxes have the enable link button checked if they have the same instance number. So if all the hover boxes have the same instance number, you'll want to make sure that all the settings are the same for each hover boxes, so that the properties don't get inherited from different hover boxes. So if some have enable link button checked and some don't, then some might inherit that unchecked link button, and it won't link to whatever page or element you want to link to. So yeah, if they have the same instance number, just make sure that all the hover boxes have the same properties applied. And the styling would be the same if they have the same instance number. If you wanted different hover boxes with different colors, different text settings, then you want to change the instance number right here and give the new hover box a unique instance number. All right, so I just wanted to kind of clear that up there because I have had that question come up a few times. All right, so I'm just going to make a nice grid here. I'll move this down, and we'll do something like that and like that. Perfect. And I'll change the image for a few of them just to kind of make it a little bit different. I might go through the responsive lightbox gallery as well if I can get through this video fairly quickly, but here I'm just changing the images. All right, looks good. So I'll leave these down here the same just to save a bit of time. So now I'll select all of these hover boxes. I'll go to the resize option right up here, and I'll say responsive width and height. And if you followed along with me on the 17-day course, you can also go to the left panel here and select the resize option from here, responsive width and height. We have the resize option there. Or you can right click and say resize and say responsive width and height. You can select the resize option by right clicking as well. All right, so now if I preview, so I'll preview in the browser. Hopefully that rain isn't too loud. So I'm resizing, and that looks good. We can see they kind of go over each other because the minimum width is set to 230 for all of them. So let me just go ahead and change that. I'll set the minimum width to 0 for all of them. And I'll kind of fast forward here, but I'll just change it to 0. Okay, so there I've changed the minimum width for all the hover boxes to 0. So I'll preview again, and I'll resize. So we have this nice grid that's responsive in width and height, and we have that nice hover box applied to them. So this is the 180 text reveal hover box. So when it gets too small, the text is not really visible. So what I would do in this case is create a breakpoint at, let's say, 600. By going to the breakpoints bar, I'll kind of repeat that there. So I'll just right click on the breakpoint bar, say 600 for the breakpoint. And then here I would line up, you know, all the hover boxes, maybe make them, you know, 2 by well, it's 9, so yeah, I would do something like this, and maybe add one more hover box at the end and make them larger. So here I would make them 300 by 300. So I won't spend too much time on this. So basically what I'm doing is just changing the size and realigning the hover boxes on this breakpoint. So we'll do something like that. So at first I was going to do 2 by 2, but I'll just do them down the middle, just like that. And I'll make this 300 by 300. Let me select all these here. 300 by 300. There we go. And I'm not going to go over too many of the options within the hover box. I do have a couple other video tutorials that go over kind of all the text styling within the hover boxes. Here I'm going to go to the align panel, select align to selection, and distribute vertical centers so they're all evenly spaced. Alright, that should do it, and I can make them even a bit larger. So I'll say 400 by 400 here on the 600 breakpoint. Boom. And I'll bring this down just like that. Align, distribute vertical centers, and I'll align to the content area. Here I'll say align to content area, which is aligned to the page, and I'll align it in the center, and I'll pin it responsively to the center, so all the elements stay in the center as the browser resizes. Alright, so let's see how that looks. I'll preview in the browser, and there we go, 600 breakpoint. The hover box changes. So now we have plenty of space to see the hover box. Looks good. So that is the new update. So you can now set the hover boxes to responsive width and height and have a really nice responsive layout for your website. So the last thing I'm going to go over, and I'm going to try to do this fairly quickly, is linking to the RLG widget, the RLG single. So I'll go to the library panel and I'll type in RLG. I'm going to bring in the RLG 1.7, which is the latest update. I'll bring in the add first, RLG add first, I'll bring it right in there. And I'll bring in the RLG single, and I'll say images here. So here I'll click, hold, and drag, place right in there. Perfect. And then here, because the graphic style name is trigger1, actually let me zoom in here. So the graphic style name is trigger1 for the RLG single. I'm going to assign the graphic style name trigger1 to all these hover boxes. So I'll select them all, go to the graphic styles panel. If you don't see the graphic styles panel, you can go to window and click on graphic styles. So yeah, one more time, there's graphic styles. And I'm kind of moving a bit quickly just to save some time here. And here I'll create a new graphic style by clicking on this icon that looks like a piece of paper with a folded corner. So I'll click there, and I'll double click on style. So I'll double click, and within the graphic style option dialog box, I'll say trigger1, because that's the graphic style name that's in the RLG single widget. So there, all of the hover boxes have been assigned the graphic style name trigger1, and it will open the light box. So I'll preview, file, preview page, and browser. So I click, and it opens the hover box. Looks good. So I can resize, click, and it opens the hover box. I can add a few images. So I'll go to image 1, and see I have a few images here. Image 2, image 3. Image 4, yeah, we'll just do something like this. Alright, looks good. And I'll preview one more time. I'll click, and we have this nice responsive lightbox gallery that's being triggered by the hover boxes. Perfect. Looks good. So you can now have a really nice grid layout for your elements and hover boxes. And yeah, for the hover boxes, and then link them to the responsive lightbox gallery, or just have them, you know, in the layout of your website. So that is it. That is it for the update to the hover boxes. They can now be responsive width and height, and the spacing will stay the same between them. As one more example, I know I'm kind of going fairly long. I'm going to set the resize option to responsive width, just to give one more demonstration of what it was kind of doing before. So now it's set to responsive width, and if I resize, we can see those gaps there. So you just want to make sure that you select them all, and in the resize option, set it to responsive width and height. So there's no gaps in between there, and the hover boxes resize nicely. Looks good. All right, and we can see that everything moves with those hover boxes. So it's a really nice kind of responsive layout there. We can see the screen box moves as well up the site, and everything kind of just moves in a nice way. It's a nice layout there. All right, so that is it for the update to the hover boxes. To get access to the hoverbox widgets, you simply go to museforyoushop.com, and here you can click on join today, and here you can click subscribe now to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. You can click here on hoverbox to see all the hoverboxes, and here all of these hoverboxes have been updated to work with the responsive width and height option in Adobe Muse. So you can select from these hover boxes and set them to responsive width and height in Adobe Muse. So I'll go back to the widgets here. So here I'll scroll down to the vertical panel hoverbox widget. This is the most recent hoverbox. And here you can click add to cart to purchase individually, or again, you can click subscribe to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Here are the features included, a few of the widget options, and this video will be here as well. Above the community section, here's the community section. So if you had any questions about the widget, you can leave it here and I'll be happy to answer any questions there. You can click on the preview page to see the vertical panel hoverbox widget here. So you can see we have that nice panel. All the colors are customizable for the text, the background color, and the sliding panel that goes up and down. All right, so I'll go back to shop here. So that is it for this video tutorial. Again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. If you like this video tutorial, you can subscribe below. Also in the show more section below are links to other resources and links to museforyoushop.com. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.
Muse for you, awesome websites without code.